Well, look at you legends, coming back for episode 2. Hello everyone, my name is Ep2 and this is Cosmodrome, my City Skylines series set in an alternate present day. The map revolves around one thing, and that is the Prometheus space elevator that sits right in the centre, which I built in the last episode. Click the thingy in the top corner in case you missed that one. It made me so happy that so many people tuned in for the first episode. I was literally expecting single figures, but after its first week it had over 100, so a massive thank you for all those who tuned in last time. Today I start work on the Spaceport. It's going to be located down here, in the southeastern corner of the map. This is where Elysia's space program, Elysia is the name of this fictional country by the way, well this is where the space program really took off, pun intended. Eventually I'll be building launch pads and factories and labs here, but first of all we're going to need somewhere for people to live. This is City Skylines after all, and you can't really do much without citizens. So today I'm going to be building the living quarters. This is going to be a large area of social housing that the Elysian government built to house all the workers at the spaceport. The very first thing you just saw me do was turn the whole place into an airport zone. This area isn't going to end up like a functional airport. I'm just placing this down so I can put down a few details like runways for the shuttles to land and taxiways, but that'll be much later on. I mainly wanted to get the shuttle landing strip down just to try and get some sort of scale and something to work towards. I then just added a very basic road leading from the entrance of the map. This obviously isn't a final thing, this is just a placeholder so the cars can actually drive, so the citizens can move in. I then started work on an intersection for the entrance of the spaceport. Intersections are one of those things I really have to be in the mood to build. Sometimes I really enjoy making them, sometimes I just hate doing them. This one is quite a simple one. Obviously we can't really have a highway running straight through the middle of the spaceport. It'd be far too dangerous. There could be rockets crashing out the sky and landing on top of the highway, which is obviously very deadly and not a good idea at all. So the highway is actually going to run underneath the spaceport, well, more sort of alongside it through a tunnel. This also meant that half the intersection ended up being underground, and I thought it ended up looking quite cool. At the entrance, I wanted there to be a toll booth. This sort of like acts as a security guard post. Obviously, you can't just have any old person wandering in and out of this spaceport, so only staff and invited guests are allowed in. I like the idea of having the entrance lining up with the Prometheus space elevator in the background, just so any workers who live off-site or visitors can see the progress of the space elevator when it was being constructed, and now they have the perfect view of it when they arrive. The living quarters are going to sit on the other side of this hill, so I put down a small highway which I like to use for rural roads. Kind of makes sense to have roads like these rather than the ones with the sidewalks. It also means that cars travel at a more realistic speed as well. Having it on the other side of the hill would provide some protection from things like noise pollution from rockets launching, and also in case anything goes catastrophically wrong it should protect them from any large explosions that might happen if there's a horrible accident. But in this timeline I now imagine that spaceflight probably has a similar safety record to flying commercially now. And with the space elevator up and running now, there'll be a lot less cargo rockets taking off. I wanted the living quarters, which I decided to call Cosmo City in the end, to be its own little self-sustained community, designed to be spacious, with lots of lovely palm trees, and with things like restaurants, and even a cinema, which is one of the first buildings I put down. I then had to think about what kind of residential buildings I wanted to spawn in. So I went and painted down a few tiles of various sizes to see what would spawn. The theme I wanted to go for was something concrete, something quick, cheap and easy to build. I didn't want there to be too much variation in buildings either. Kind of wanted to feel like they were almost sort of all done to the same plan to save costs. And also a lot of them could be easily prefabbed and built really quickly. In the end I decided to go for the building style that came with the Plaza's DLC. They were perfect for what I had in mind. Just big, cubey, concrete buildings basically. And in terms of the Cosmodrome's timeline, these were built in the 1970s, so they've been around for a fair while. So imagine all this brightly coloured paintings we see on the side is a relatively new thing they've added to try and cheer up the grey old buildings a bit. There was spawn building style, I decided to go with which spawned on a 4x4 tile. So I started to paint down all these 4x4s and then built the rest of the grid around that. Well, I wanted this area to be very walkable as well. The idea is that a lot of people here don't really own their own cars and just commute to work on a tram system that I'm also going to put in. So I replaced a lot of the roads already put down with walkable plazas and tram lines. To get all this functioning, I had to link them up to some utility buildings I placed down on a separate island. I didn't really want these utility buildings here, so I know it looks stupid because they're somehow teleporting all their trash and everything to this island, but don't worry about that, it's functioning fine. As for the other utilities, things like police and fire, things like that, I decided to put those on the other side of the hill. Eventually I'm going to incorporate those into the rest of the spaceport somewhere. I'm sure as many of you vanilla players will know, without the Plot the Growables mod, we now play a game of whack-a-mole, where we basically have to wait for the buildings we want to spawn and delete anything that we don't want as soon as it pops up. And this can get very tedious, but hey, this is what I get for playing on consoles. To keep the building styles I wanted, I turned them into the historical buildings, just basically to stop them changing their shape or growing extra stories when they level up. Another type of building started spawning in on the corners as well, which I really like the look of. So I decided to keep those and use those as the corner buildings for each square. I added a few smaller buildings on the outskirts to add a little bit more variety. And I think they came up looking quite nice in the end. The way I see this place working, when you get a job at the spaceport, you're assigned some living quarters. And that's based entirely on the rank and how well paid your job is. They don't pay rent as such, it's more like a small utility fee to help the upkeep of Cosmo City. But in terms of, you know, food and shopping, that sort of stuff you have to pay for yourself. Or if you want to go see a movie or something, again, that's something you have to pay for. And then as you move up the corporate ladder, or maybe you already began with a well-paid job or a more specialized job, you get a bigger apartment. The lowest paid workers live in a house share. They'll have their own room, but a shared bathroom and kitchen area. But then eventually you'll get your own studio apartment, and the higher paid up people will have their own house, which you'll see me build later. We're going to put a whole suburb around the edge of this. This will also be a good place for families to move in as well. I'm even going to put down a school, so it creates this whole lovely community where people don't really ever have to leave. If they don't want to, of course they're free to go whenever they like. I wanted there to be plenty of space in between the buildings as well, so I laid down lots of paths in between them and then added lots of more palm trees to give the whole place a nice tropical feeling. The way I see it is that these palm trees aren't native, they were introduced, and I've placed a few more around the map. As I imagined, they've kind of spread into the surrounding environment. As the palm trees weren't just introduced here, later on I'm going to be building more artificial islands, and the palm trees were brought in to help stop the sand eroding away from the islands. So basically there are now palm trees everywhere. It's now time to start putting down some commercial buildings. Again, I wanted this place to have quite an old-timey feel to it, and I particularly like some of the Art Deco buildings that start spawning in. These are probably a little bit old-fashioned for the 1970s, but I kind of imagine, I think they wanted to give the whole thing this sort of like nice, wholesome retro feel when they were building this place. So again, I just tend to whack-a-mole again, deleting the buildings I didn't like, the more modern-looking ones, and waiting for things like nice diners and burger restaurants to spawn in. I placed down a few buildings from the campus DLC as well. I really like the look of some of these. I imagine one of them is a supermarket and the other one is like a diner or something. And yeah, they really make the place look great. We also then had to figure out where the tram lines would go, because they needed to do a nice loop round somewhere because they can't just change direction of the track for some reason. I'm sure you guys all know that. And then I did some nice detailed parks in the centre of it all. Once I finished all the detailing on the parks, it was time to add the low density and family housing. I just took a road and did a nice simple curvy loop around the edge of Cosmo City. Then I used one of my favourite little hacks for making these really good looking cul-de-sacs. I think I learned this from Imperator. What you do is you take the 4-lane utility road and you make as small little tiny road as possible. You then pick another 4-lane road of your choosing and connect it to whichever road you want. Then you take whichever 2-lane road you want and upgrade the second 4-lane road you place down, and it turns it into this lovely cul-de-sac. It's a bit of a hack, but it looks great. The buildings around here, I went for the mid-century housing pack. There are some really great looking buildings in this one. But again, I didn't want there to be a huge variety of houses. So again, I was only painting in certain sizes of housing, waiting to spawn in, and deleting any of the ones I didn't like the look of. I wanted this area, much like the high density area, to have that prefab feeling again, like they were built in mass production. Like maybe they even came out of a catalogue or something. I really didn't like any of the houses with flat roofs, so they all had to go. This was so time consuming, it took so long to get all the correct houses to spawn in, and still don't think I've nailed it. I still think I've got the odd flat roof building spawning in, so yeah, it's just a very tedious task, waiting for the houses you want to grow, turning those into historical buildings so they don't change their appearance when they level up, and deleting any buildings you don't like until one you like finally spawns in. I think there's a slight glitch with the mid-century building, which is very frustrating. When I seem to place a lot of them down, the screen will occasionally flash black when I'm deleting things. Problem got really bad later on when I was doing some terraforming. I thought the game was going to crash, it almost went completely black. I'm pretty sure it's to do with this mid-century housing theme, which is a real shame because they look great, but it kind of almost puts me off using it. With enough houses spawned, it was time to go even more into the detailing side of things. I wanted these places to have their own backyards. The houses here don't really spawn with any decent detailed backyards. There's the odd detail here, like the odd patio or the odd piece of furniture, but it's not quite as detailed as I'd liked, so I started to do my own backyard detailing. And first of all, that meant plopping down a huge amount of fences. This was another very long and very tedious task. I'm using the forest industry fences. In my opinion, these are the most like wood panel fencing you'd have in the back garden. When placing down the fences, I also had to be careful not to go over any of the green tiles already painted down. Otherwise, the house would spawn in a different shape than I wanted it to. So just a case of keep on putting them down until every house had its own little section of back garden. I decided to call this suburb the astronaut houses. In the world of Cosmodrome, the word astronaut has lost all meaning, similar to a way that's happening in our world today. There are so many different jobs in space now. The main reason the Space Elevate was built to start and maintain a whole network of asteroid mines. So what's your class as an astronaut? I mean, are the miners out there, are they astronauts? Are the people working in labs? Are they astronauts? Are the few millionaires who can afford trips up into space for tourism? Are they astronauts? But originally when these houses were built, it was still very much the pioneering days of space travel. And astronauts did used to live in these houses. Not all of them, because that would be a hell of a lot of astronauts. So it would have been for astronauts, their families, and also the high rep management of the spaceport. When the fencing was finally done, I think this probably took about an hour, maybe, to do all this fencing. I popped down some trees to go around the outside. I imagine this whole valley was a woodland before, so I placed down a bunch of broadleaf trees and then some of these sneaky palm trees that have started to grow in between them. It's then time to start to detail the back gardens. Now you're probably wondering why on earth I'm placing down so many outhouses in all these back gardens. Surely all these houses will have their own toilets. Well, I think outhouses make the perfect garden shed, or outside storage, somewhere where people can keep their lawnmowers and strimmers and all their gardening equipment. So I like to place these down in people's gardens. I then basically went through the props available, picking out things like garden furniture and playgrounds, things like that, and started placing them randomly in people's back gardens. I also used some of the decorative tiles that came with the Parks DLC. They make great patios and decks, so I treat a few of the houses to those as well. And for the last few touches I started doing other things like trees, just to really finish it off. I did a few last minute little bits of detailing, going through again, deleting any houses I didn't like, until I was finally happy with it. And yeah, I'm really happy with how this place came out. I know this hasn't been the most craziest sci-fi-ist thing ever, but we'll get to that in the next episode. There's going to be plenty of rocket ships and all sorts going on. So I hope to see you in that one. At this point in the video, I'd normally shut up, but I'm sure you guys are aware that the release date for City Skylines 2 dropped a couple of weeks ago. So what does that mean for this series? Well, I really want to get this thing finished. One thing I really hate about some of my favourite City Skylines YouTubers, naming no names, is when they start a city, do so many episodes, and then the city just never gets finished. I don't want that to happen here. I am determined to finish this city. I'm probably not going to go out and buy City Skylines 2 on day one. There's so many other good games coming out around the same time, so I'll probably want to get through those first. And to be honest, I really want to get the city finished as well. I've not finished many before, so I'm determined to give this one a go. And I really hope to have it done by the end of the year, but I also hate deadlines, so that may not stick. Yeah, so that's the plan. Take care guys, and hope to see you soon.